New Zealand's racing minister, Winston Peters, committed to a phase-out by July 2026, with legislation passing its first reading in Parliament. Well, in Australia, Western Australia is currently undertaking a government inquiry into greyhound racing through the Environment and Public Affairs Committee, which encompasses all aspects of the sport, with stakeholder hearings commencing on the 30th of March 2026. This came from a petition tabled and signed by over 27,000 West Australians. And in August 2025, the Tasmanian Liberal government committed to phase out racing by the 30th of June 2029. Yet, Australia kills more racing greyhounds than any other country in the world. In 2025, 119 dogs died on Australian racetracks, and 10,785 were injured, nearly 30 injuries every single day. And already, in just the first 2 months of 2026, there have been 8 deaths and 1,227 injuries. But even these disturbing figures don't reflect the full reality. The racing industry claims that deaths and injuries are declining. However, that claim depends heavily on how the numbers are recorded. Dogs who suffer catastrophic injuries are frequently taken off the track and euthanized at veterinary clinics shortly afterwards. And because the death does not technically occur on the track itself, it's not counted as a racing fatality. And beyond this, many more dogs are euthanized during training sessions and trial runs, and these are incidents that are not available to the public. So when you hear the official statistics, we're not hearing the whole story. We are seeing only a fraction of the suffering. Behind the numbers are broken bodies, preventable deaths, and thousands of dogs who never had the chance to live the lives they deserved. But this industry has a social cost for people as well. In the 2024 to 25 financial year, Australians lost approximately $32 billion to all forms of legal gambling. This figure represents the highest per capita gambling losses in the world. Recent studies indicate that around 3 million adult Australians experienced some form of gambling-related harm in the past year, which can include financial hardship, mental health, impacts, and relationship strain. And finally, greyhound racing is a dying sport, with governments propping it up using taxpayer dollars. In 2024, Australian taxpayers contributed over $250 million to the greyhound racing industry, which includes approximately $194 million in direct handouts and another $60 million for publicly funded regulatory bodies. Now, I think we can all agree that this money would be better spent on healthcare, education, or addressing the homelessness crisis. So now, with everything I've said in mind, let's hear from our panel so that we may use this space to inspire action, spark some new ideas, and move this critical movement forward. So it's my pleasure to introduce our distinguished panel of greyhound advocates joining us from all over the world. So first up, we have Amy MacMahon, President, Coalition for the Protection of Greyhounds. Yay! Carrie Thiel, Executive Director, Grey 2K USA Worldwide. Elliott Fox, Artist and Greyhound Advocate. Fran Chambers, Coordinator, Let Greyhounds Run Free, and Board Member of Grey 2K USA Worldwide. And Lisa White, President and Founder, Friends of the Hound Greyhound Adoption Group. And Mel Harrison, President, Free the Hounds, Western Australia. So I have some targeted questions for each person, each of our panel, and they're going to come up and they're going to give you the answer up here. So for the first one, we're going to start with Lisa. And we need to know, what is the homing situation for rescued greyhounds, and what are you seeing on the front lines?
Hello, everyone. Friends of the Hound has been saving and finding homes for greyhounds for over 22 years. We have first-hand knowledge of the desperate oversupply of greyhounds. We receive calls and emails every week from trainers and owners looking to surrender their dogs often multiple dogs. Since we began, the greyhound racing industry has bred around 400,000 dogs, with fewer than 62% registered to race. The unnecessary wastage of healthy, sentient animals is undeniable. Greyhound racing is built on animal and human harm, primarily benefiting gambling operators. The fundamental disconnect between greyhounds as betting products and as intelligent social animals is at the core of racing's ethical failings. Greyhounds are bred to be discarded. The industry's exit strategy for greyhounds is to shift responsibility onto rescue groups and the community, and that system is overwhelmed. Greyhounds and community goodwill are being exploited. Greyhounds are said to be vulnerable animals. Their exploitation extends beyond financial gain to isolation in kennels, confinement and spatial deprivation, multiple changes in ownership and premises, and lack of early socialisation. Greyhounds are often deprived of basic needs and simple kindness. Rescue groups frequently take in dogs displaying physical and psychological trauma, yet the industry rehoming programs selectively ignore dogs that are timid, scared or reactive. Of course, there's always greyhounds that walk straight into your home, find the comfiest bed and immediately relax into their new life. And a lot of us here know that firsthand because we have them. The recent Drake inquiry in New South Wales, the report recommended capping breeding numbers in line with rehoming capacity. It also recommended ending Greyhound Racing New South Wales' US export program. The New South Wales government did not accept either recommendation. Exporting dogs is not a sustainable welfare solution. It is evidence, however, that Australia cannot responsibly absorb the number of greyhounds produced. Then there's the reliance on self-reporting mechanisms. When trainers and owners are responsible for reporting the fate of unwanted greyhounds, the system is open to error, manipulation and concealment. The industry-led rehoming programs are focused on numbers. At Friends of the Hound, we supply tailored support to each dog in our care. We also take in the broken and the sick ones, dogs with injuries, fractured hocks, broken wrists, heartworm and resistant hookworm. They are cared for in the homes of experienced volunteer rescuers and foster carers. Lynette and I both have at least 8 to 12 in our home at any one time. Our home-based model, with in-home assessments and careful screening and suitability matching, supports lasting adoptions. Despite offering best practice homing processes, people are often drawn to online giveaways and the industry's glossy, prolific marketing and cheap dogs. The story we hear when the industry talks about greyhound adoption is positive. We hear that dogs are being rehomed and adoption pathways and welfare outcomes are improving. But for the front line of rescue, little has changed. Just too many dogs. Until greyhound breeding, disposal and waiting lists are properly regulated, no amount of welfare initiatives will make any meaningful difference. Over recent years, with the GAP programs reaching capacity, the industry has placed greater focus on participant rehoming. This includes trainers and owners giving away dogs, listing them on sites like Gumtree and Marketplace. On paper, third-party rehoming may sound like success, but in practice, many of these are negligent transactions occurring without proper care, preparation, assessment, information or support. And when these rehomings fail, as many do, the dogs don't go back to the trainers, they come to us. And unwitting people are left feeling misled, discouraged and dismayed. So while official industry rehoming numbers might suggest that more dogs are being adopted, rescue groups like ours are experiencing a significant rise in community surrenders, more complex cases, longer rehabilitation and homing times. Every foster home that we fill with a failed industry adoption is a placement we cannot offer to a dog desperately waiting in a cage. Our waiting lists never shrink. Luckily, people are always helping. They open their hearts and their homes. But the community, everyday people, are expected to absorb the responsibility and lifelong cost when these dogs exit the track. We cannot be the strategy. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Lisa. That was fantastic. Okay, the next question is for Mel. Given the submissions to the Western Australian Parliamentary Inquiry into Greyhound Racing closed in November 2025, and a hearing is scheduled for the 30th of March, what do we know at this stage, and what do you expect the inquiry's findings or recommendations to be?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for welcoming us so gratefully here coming from Western Australia. It's really good to to be sort of amongst everybody. We kind of feel a little bit lonely over there sometimes. And while I'm talking about WA, I just would like everybody to be really aware that if we can get one state over the line for an inquiry or to end racing, that is going to start a domino effect everywhere. So please don't zone out because it's WA. If we can make it happen somewhere, these are strategies then that we can use to, get other states there. So first of all, the things that we do know, Vicky. We know now that the committee received more than 5,000 submissions for the inquiry, and that is an unprecedented level of engagement for a state inquiry of this kind. That alone tells us something important. It tells us that greyhound racing is no longer a niche issue, it is a matter of significant public concern. While not all submissions have been published, we do know a few key things at this stage. First, the overwhelming volume of submissions came from West Australians. This wasn't an orchestrated interstate campaign. This was local community engagement that matters, and that matters politically. Second, the inquiry was triggered by a sustained public pressure, including a petition of more than 27,000 West Australians. That demonstrates that this isn't simply about minor regulatory tweaks, it reflects genuine discomfort with the industry or the sport itself. Third, we know that injury and fatality data has continued to accumulate during the inquiry period. In 2025 alone, WA tracks, Cannington and Mandurah, were the worst in the country for on-track deaths. That this year, Cannington has already recorded 3 deaths, as has Mandurah, and has needed to be closed for inspection or review due to these ongoing issues. This ongoing harm forms part of the context of what the committee must consider. So what can we reasonably expect? There are generally 3 broad pathways that inquiries can take. The first possibility is a recommendation for strengthened regulation. So improved welfare standards, better injury reporting, independent track audits, and tighter breeding controls. What would we would expect from that kind of a recommendation would be independent oversight or auditing rather than the controlling body self-regulating, and stronger rehoming accountability as well. A potentially financial reform around how public money is distributed. The second possibility is a structural reform model. So that is where the committee will acknowledge systemic welfare failures and recommends major changes to governance, funding and industry oversight. Because in Western Australia, the gambling arm, which is Racing WA or the TAB, is owned by the government, and the WA Greyhound Racing Association, which is the Greyhound Racing Club, sits within the government. So you can see that there's not much independence in any of that. It would remove control from the industry over all the welfare and separate commercial and welfare functions. And the third possibility, and the one that we want, is a recommended phase out of greyhound racing over a 3-year period. We've already seen that occurring in New Zealand and also Wales. So again, these precedents matter because they demonstrate that governments can act when welfare harm becomes incompatible with community expectation. And when you've got the numbers and enough people speaking about it, change has to come. Do we expect WA to immediately recommend a full ban? Well, realistically, parliamentary committees are often cautious. They tend to recommend staged reform first. However, even if a phase-out is not immediately recommended, we do expect that the findings will acknowledge that catastrophic injuries are inherent to the sport, that transparency has been inadequate, the community trust is eroded, and that the current regulatory model lacks independence. The political landscape also really matters, and this is something for every single state. While we would like it to be about welfare and how people feel about dogs, unfortunately, unlike everybody in this room, money matters more than the animal welfare. So engaging with government is really important, but if we can get incremental recommendations, they will lay the groundwork for future reform. So whether the report acknowledges systemic welfare harm rather than isolated instances, whether it calls for truly independent oversight, and whether it questions the sustainability of the industry long term, they're the three elements that we hope will appear, because they are the ones that will set the trajectory forward. Finally, our hearing is scheduled, as Vicky said, for the 30th of March, and it's significant because it gives the committee an opportunity to test evidence publicly. Free the Hounds have been asked to attend, the RSPCA WA has also, and obviously the Racing Regulatory Board. But what we do know for certain is that community scrutiny is now embedded in the parliamentary record. The industry is being examined at a depth it has not experienced before in Western Australia. And whatever the final recommendations are, the inquiry has already shifted the conversation. And that shift in and of itself is very powerful. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mel. The next person up we have is Amy from the Coalition for the Protection of Greyhounds. And her question is, looking critically at our current efforts, what specific advocacy tactics or campaigns are proving most effective, and where do we need to pivot or innovate to accelerate the end of racing?
Thank you to all of you for being here. Big thank you to the organisers. Thank you to Vicky, who has wrangled all of our greyhound advocates. I feel really lucky to be part of this really incredible group of advocates and to be sharing this space with you all today as well. So Vicky sort of outlined the situation for greyhound racing in Australia. It's inherently dangerous. We had 119 deaths last year. This year alone, we've had 10 greyhounds die on tracks, likely many more who have been killed off track after a race. There is no way to make a greyhound racing track safe. You can't reform this sector. The only way to improve greyhound welfare is to get rid of greyhound racing. And I think to properly reflect on what's been working in our campaigns and what we need to do next, we need to have a clear picture of what we're up against. Australia has the biggest greyhound racing sector in the world. We have about 58 tracks. The UK has 18. We have this intense normalisation of gambling in Australia. Vicky mentioned we've got the biggest gambling losses per capita in the world. Gambling is very normalised in Australia. You go to the pub and you'll often see greyhound racing up on the screens. People are betting on their phones. And we can look at this sector and kind of size of the racing sector, but it's not really the trainers and the people involved in the sector who are making the money. It's the gambling companies who are making huge profits off the back of betting, including on greyhound racing. And this is really what is perpetuating this industry. These same gambling companies are the ones donating to the major political parties in nearly every state. The data on donations is scant, but the data we have from Queensland, which is there's very good reporting requirements. Last year, gambling companies and the kind of gambling lobby called Responsible Wagering Australia donated collectively $55,000 to the major political parties. And one of the depressing things is it doesn't cost that much to buy off political parties if you want something. And what the gambling companies have gotten in return is a continuation of greyhound racing in nearly every state. And so how do we build a movement that is big enough to take on the power, the political power and the economic power of the gambling companies? And that's what we're each trying to do, to build up a movement that's big enough to end greyhound racing. We've got some good examples of what has worked. We've got Fran here from Tasmania. Tasmania has just secured a ban on greyhound racing, and yeah, really incredible work that Fran will be able to talk about in a bit more detail, but there's some really interesting elements of their campaign. It was very targeted in the lead up to the Tasmanian state election, focusing on political parties and focusing on candidates. The Tasmanian campaign also had a laser sharp focus on the amount of public money going from the government to greyhound racing. And they had done some really incredible work with an economist to get all the data together to show people that there is literally millions of dollars going into greyhound racing that could be going into other things that people actually need. And I think this is a really interesting element of this campaign, because one of our challenges is how do we reach the next layer of people beyond those people who sort of have a natural affinity with animals or are concerned about greyhounds. I think everyone cares about animals, but for a lot of people it won't be their top issue. So how do we reach that next layer of people? And talking about the public funding, I think, has been really powerful. It's a way that can loop in that next layer of people and get them on board. Tasmania also had a coalition of a number of different organisations who've been working together for quite some time, and importantly also RSPCA Tasmania. In places where the RSPCA has gotten on board, that has been a really powerful factor. That's what happened in New Zealand. The SPCA there had kind of gotten to the end of their rope, and they were like, well, the industry isn't engaging in good faith, and so they came out and said, we're opposing greyhound racing. Now we are working really hard with RSPCAs in other states to say you need to come out and say there is no way to make this sector safe. That's probably a conversation for another time, but these coalitions of different organisations working together. Melda's talked about what's going on in WA. That inquiry was launched off the back of a huge petition, 26,000 signatures. And so being able to demonstrate the size of the movement of people who are opposed to greyhound racing is a really important part of balancing that power of the gambling companies. If you could say, well, actually, we know that the majority of everyday people don't support greyhound racing, and we've got these huge petitions that provide some of that evidence, that's part of how we start to chip away of the power of those of the gambling companies. We also know that some of what we're doing is working because industries in each state are taking measures to try and counter what the greyhound advocates have been doing. In Queensland, the government have just run a review into racing more broadly, and one of their recommendations for greyhound racing was to essentially start a propaganda wing, a media arm, to be countering information that comes from the anti-greyhound racing sector, and they've gotten some personalities on board. I don't know if people are familiar with Alfie Langer as a footballer from Queensland. I've gotten him on board as kind of the face of promoting greyhound racing, and they've got a social media team to try and counter what we've been talking about, but also to get more people gambling, because they know once people have a kind of financial interest in racing, they are less likely to go, well, I don't want to see that. So there's tracks being closed in different states, and the industry pushing back really hard. There's a network in Tasmania that's been trying to push back against the ban there. So I guess this gives us an indication of what we're doing is working, because the industry are scared and they're worried. So beyond that, what else do we need to be doing? How do we reach that next layer of people to get them on board so that we can be able to demonstrate to political parties, to MPs, to racing ministers that the tide the tide has turned. And I'm hoping all of you can be part of that. We would really love as many people as possible on board, being able to share information, being able to talk to other people. Please come and check out the Coalition for Protection of Greyhounds table in the expo hall, and we can talk a bit more about what each of you could be doing in your own states to be putting pressure on your state governments to end greyhound racing. And we might, in questions, we might be able to talk about this a little bit. If any of you have any ideas for what we should be doing to reach people to end greyhound racing, we are really keen to hear it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. Speaking of Tasmania, I'm going to ask Fran. The Tasmanian Parliament's lower house passed the bill to end greyhound racing in December 2025. It was narrowly defeated in the upper house and deferred to a special committee. The bill will be debated again in the upper house within the next 6 weeks or so. What are the chances that the bill will pass through the upper house, and what are you doing to keep pressure on the government?
Thank you, Vicky. And thank you, everybody, for being here. And we haven't got it yet, okay? So Amy was almost right, and thank you, Amy, for your really valuable input just then. Briefly, on the 10th of August last year, the Premier, Jeremy Rockliff, came out suddenly saying that greyhound racing in Tasmania was going to end by the 30th of June 2029. Immediately, we didn't know anything about this, but so that's the first anyone knew of it. And we've been racing ever since. And of course, there's a decade-long preamble to all of this, but just on what's happened in the last few months. Immediately, and I don't think you'll disagree with this statement, the forces of darkness and evil just reared their ugly heads, and they have commissioned well-known lobbyists and some person from Queensland who are just revving up the pro-industry people. And they're getting pretty nasty. You know, it's not nice. Yes, it was in early December, back to dates and what happened. The lower house passed the bill easily. But of course, it was just past an election, and I think you're all pretty au fait with the workings of politics and elections. And we had gained more independence and we have a strong force of Greens and independents. So in the lower house, it got through easily. And then it has to go to the upper house, the House of Review, and that's where it gets really tricky. So, and that's, all of that's going on now as we speak. And yes, perhaps 6 weeks and perhaps another 6 weeks after that, it will be debated in the upper house. Now, one of our jobs, well, one of the most important jobs now, in our time, is to get those members who are going to be voting to see the reasons why they should vote for us, for this cause. And it's a pretty hard road to tread, because we've come to the real realisation that so many of these people simply don't care. They really don't care. Now, it's our focus, and we've also commissioned lobbyists to help us. We've got two of the best in Tasmania, and we is I'm speaking on behalf of Grey 2K USA worldwide here. So we have commissioned a lobbyist, and he's really getting to work. He can they can go places we can't, right? So we need those people. And for all of us in this room who care about what we're doing, we need these people to get in where we simply, if and where the doors are closed to us. So that's great. And we've got another local well-known lobbyist who's helping, particularly the RSPCA, Tas, who are amazing, and the Dogs Home of Tasmania, who receive no funding. They get dogs lobbed on them every day. Quite a large number of dogs are in the process of being surrendered to the RSPCA, who haven't got the space for them. And neither of those two are funded for this work that they're doing. And it's really important, and Mel's mentioned this point in the past, every rescued greyhound that comes to one of us, and to Lisa and Lynette's and all of us, the people who are actually taking the dogs in, you're doing it, Lisa and Lynette are doing it, specifically greyhounds, but there are so many organisations. We know how many other dogs are bred and discarded, etc., etc. So they miss out, and you might have to watch the clock because I could keep going. Okay, so we're not across the line because it has to pass the upper house, and we're just doing our darndest to get it across the line. And I don't need to go into any more details than that. With regard to the other, and Amy mentioned, we've got a pretty good team down in Tasmania, and I call it our loose church because it's a group of different people with different ideas, different points of view, different thoughts as to way things should go. But we've managed to all agree that we're there for this specific cause. This is what we're here for, and we're all going for it in our own ways, but we're really clear. And with all those different talents, it's been fantastic because A can go where B might not have any experience or might not be good at, and C is really good at this, etc., etc., etc. So I'm really proud of our loose coalition or loose church in Tasmania. And also, I've been doing this for a long, long time. You don't need to know the details, but you all know it because you're all there, right? And that's why we're all here, and that's why I love coming to this forum, because you're amongst friends, right? You really do. And a special mention to my friend Kay, we've been friends since we were 10 years old. Yeah. So what Amy was talking about with the ways we've done it, we had the economist Saul Eslake to commission a financial analysis of greyhound racing in Tasmania, nothing to do with welfare. And we knew what his results would be because it's obvious. But so he is an eminent economist, and he came out saying basically the government is subsidising a sheltered workshop, and it should go. And so we're doing things like that. Grey 2K are working so hard around the world, and they put a lot of effort into Australia and Tasmania. And so I just thank everybody who's working so damned hard on it. And my amazing friends and colleagues who are here today, I'm just very happy and humbled and delighted. And also that greyhounds have become centre stage at this forum as well. I think it's so important. I love all the work that we're all doing, but we've been living and breathing this particular part of the work for such a long time. So I'll stop because I do get a little bit emotional, but thank you all for being here and be on board, okay? Thank you.
Well done. Thank you, Fran. That was amazing. Okay, so we have Carrie from Grey 2K USA Worldwide, and I've got a big general question. The movement to end greyhound racing is gaining momentum in so many areas of the world. What is working in these fights, and what isn't?
Thank you. Imagine trying to follow these incredible greyhound advocates. What a challenge. Thank you, all of you, for being here today. I want to thank the organizers. It means so much to me. My mother was the head of a local animal rights group decades ago, one of the first animal rights groups that existed in the United States. And so I grew up, in a sense, in this movement. And to be here among friends and really family is how I view it, is very powerful to me. And it matters a lot to me that the movement here is prioritizing this fight. I'm biased, obviously, but I do think the Greyhound fight is absolutely critical to the future, not only of this issue, but the animal rights movement in general. So I've been working on this issue for 25 years. This industry has existed for a century. It's just about the 100-year anniversary of the existence of the greyhound racing industry, and there's no doubt in my mind that we are here today at what is the critical moment in the history so far of this industry and this movement to help these gentle dogs. Literally in the coming weeks, we're going to see critical votes to end greyhound racing completely in the United States. I just learned on Friday that apparently the U.S. Congress and the House Agriculture Committee will vote on an amendment that would abolish greyhound racing nationwide in America, which is something we've been working on for literally for decades. The absolutely essential Tasmania vote, which is going to be very close, and we're working very hard on with Fran and others. Bills to outlaw gambling on greyhound racing in the American states of Iowa, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. Bills to outlaw greyhound racing in Wales and Scotland. The bill to outlaw greyhound racing in New Zealand, and of course the absolutely critically important fight in WA. All of those things are going to come together basically over the next 5 or 6 weeks. And I can tell you, almost all of them, on almost every single one of those fights, as I stand here today, the outcome is uncertain. Literally, they could all go either way. So this is an incredibly consequential moment for this movement. And when I look at across the world, what is working, and Amy covered some of this already, but I see 3 consistent commonalities. The first is that the animal rights community and the greyhound advocacy community are engaging in the political process in a very sophisticated way. And quite frankly, and I say this as a longtime animal rights activist, sometimes in ways that are more sophisticated than our movement has generally been. Using professional lobbyists, using polling extensively, not only partnering with parties like AGP and the Green Party, who have been, in Scotland, our champion is Mark Ruskell, this incredible Greens. Tasmania would not be happening without Cassie O'Connor and others. Those parties have been absolutely critical to us, but also breaking through at the major parties. And I think both of those things have to happen for us to win on this issue. So that's number one, is this is a movement that has become very politically sophisticated. And I think that's because the industry is so politically sophisticated. Think about it. The greyhound racing industry has had generations of investing in the political process, working with politicians, having professional lobbyists. To go into these fights without having that same level of sophistication, we're not going to win. So I think, in a way, our adversary has been our teacher, which is a gift in a way. Second is the coalitions. And this was already mentioned, but Tasmania is an amazing example of that. We saw that as well in New Zealand and Scotland, and bringing together activists, small groups, big groups, anti-gambling interests, people who are concerned about the money that's being given to this industry and not spent on vital services, bringing together folks on the political left, on the political right. Just bringing together unlikely coalitions, I think, has been absolutely essential. And then the third commonality I see is really the people who are on this panel with me. All of these fights have been led by champions who get up and fight every day, who make sacrifices, who have learned to engage in a political process they probably don't enjoy a lot of the time. I can speak to that as well. And really, these are pioneers. And it's an honor for me to be here with them. And we see that in Scotland, we see it in Wales, we see it all over the world. The final thing I would say is, when I was here 2 years ago, I said that this is the only industry, the only place in our movement where we're taking on a politically powerful, economically significant, culturally relevant industry, seeking to completely abolish it, not just reform it, but abolish it, and are winning. And I think that the long-term impact of that to our movement is something that no one should lose sight of. This fight is one of the tickets to the vision for the broader animal rights movement that we're going to see some decades into the future. And so I would just ask all of you, we all have to make choices about what we prioritize as a group, as individuals. There's so many important issues. And my heart goes out to everyone here and everything you're doing to help animals. I don't want to take away from any of that in any way, shape, or form. But to the degree that the movement here can prioritize this fight and lend a hand, especially to Tasmania and WA, which these critical fights that are coming up, to all of these fights going forward, please do so, because this fight is without a doubt bigger than just the fight over greyhounds themselves. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Fantastic, inspirational. Okay, last and certainly not least, we have an artist in the house. So this is Elliott Fox. As an artist, greyhound advocate, and parent to rescued greyhound Adam Barker, what do you consider the role of creative arts to be for ending greyhound racing?
Great, thank you, Vicky. Look, as you've heard today, there's a lot of incredible work happening, not just in Australia, but across the world, and my fellow panel speakers have outlined some of that. But what I do want to emphasise in my talk is that there is an understated role for visual arts and other creative mediums. This is partly reflective of how art is undervalued and underutilised in our society today. There is a real opportunity to engage people in ways that they otherwise wouldn't be able to be reached. And this is where art needs to be more than just a pretty picture, and it needs to be where art and advocacy go hand in hand. People care when they're connected, and art can be very powerful at engaging people emotionally and intellectually. Unfortunately, a lot of contemporary art doesn't quite do enough of the latter. On the back of my recent St. Grey art exhibition that travelled across Australia to advocate for greyhounds, it was inspiring to see firsthand how art can evoke people's empathy, but more importantly, stimulate the contemplation and conversation on the topic. Art, whether it's creating, supporting, or sharing, is an important piece of the puzzle in communicating our experiences of greyhounds as family members, whilst confronting the ignorance, complicity, and apathy the racing industry relies upon. When we adopted Adam Barker to our family, we knew very little about greyhounds and even less about the racing industry. But importantly, our experience has been so relatable to every family, one about a deep sense of commitment to care, protect, and love one another, especially those who depend on us. This has also been the focus of my art exhibition, showcasing greyhounds as individuals and loved family members, and how this is at conflict with commoditisation by the racing gambling industry. So the role of visual art is very much to advocate for greyhounds by giving them a voice and a chance to be seen. But also, just as importantly, to engage a much wider audience to feel motivated and empowered to end greyhound racing. I've just given you a little bit of a snapshot of art and advocacy, but I'll be discussing this topic further in my talk tomorrow afternoon as well. So thank you. I kept this short.
Thanks, Fran. Yay. Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for all your input. And now I'm going to ask all of you to come up to this stage. I have the same question. We're just going to quickly go through and ask all of you. What are we currently doing well, and what do we need to do better? And then we'll open it up if you guys have any questions at the end. And we'll be kind of backing up onto the lunch break, but we can stay if you guys have some questions to make sure everybody gets answered. So, let's see. So we don't have the microphone. Oh, you got one. Yay. Okay, we'll start with you then. Okay, so what are we doing? The question is, what are we currently doing well, and what do we need to do better? And if each of you could just do a quick, quick speech.
Okay, sure. Well, I'll start for a change. So what we're doing well is that we're making we're making greyhounds and the dog racing industry a domestic issue for everyone. It's relatable to everyday families when they bump into greyhounds on their walks, and hearing more about how they are treated less than other dogs by the race and gambling industry. Now, what we do need to do better is that we need to make a concerted effort, all of us here in this room and beyond. There is a lot of momentum happening around the world towards ending greyhound racing, but we do need to remain focused and committed to being part of the movement. The outcome isn't just for greyhounds, but it sets the stage for other wins and more wins across all animal rights. And I will just say again that the creative sector is an important piece of that puzzle. So I do ask everyone to be sure to create, support, and share art to support the greyhounds.
Go ahead. Yeah, I would just say, I think the thing we're doing really well is that political coalition building. I mean, if you look at New Zealand as an example, before the election, you had the candidate of both major parties the night before the election, during the big debate the entire country is watching, both commit to outlawing greyhound racing. And then when the Conservative Party won, you had a racing minister who was a lifelong horse racing supporter announce the ban on greyhound racing. I mean, that should be, to me, should give all of us such hope that our movement can not be tied to the left or the right, but truly cross all lines in our society and become a mainstream movement. In terms of what others have covered, what we could do better, I'll just say I think our best days are ahead of us.
Okay, leading on from that, Tassie's been a good test case because we have lots of elections that nobody wants, brought about for various reasons that nobody cares about, and so the public is more often than anybody wants, dragged back to the ballot box. Now we've become determined to lobby candidates and to get on side. And something that Kim Oxley said earlier about kindness and not going in when you're meeting people to show them the shock horror, etc. We do a bit of that, but to really get them on side in the humane way. And we, as that small state down there, are improving with that, and we've got some incredibly entrenched people who are generations of generations. What is it? It's a hypocrisy, where this minister resigns and her or his son or daughter takes over because their name is known. So we've got that really tight community, and they vote for names. So we're in there trying to broaden that, and we have a lot of the independents who are more progressive, and we've been working hard with them as well. So that's just an extra layer.
Thanks, Fran. I think what we could be doing better, probably learning a lot of lessons from Tasmania and how we could be applying that to different states.
No pressure.
How to build up the kind of coalition of groups that Tasmania has been fostering, and how to make this a political liability for candidates and parties, using elections as a kind of political moment to be building up the pressure. South Australia has an election in a month's time. Victoria will have an election in November. And so for both of these, we're thinking about how can we be turning up the pressure in these states to make this an election issue, and to be letting candidates and parties know that this is an issue that people care about. This will be a political liability for you. I think also more broadly, how do we build connections with groups outside of the animal rights movement? How can we be building networks with the climate movement, with groups that are concerned about economic inequality, and having that cross network that will make us a lot stronger. It will also mean we will reach a new layer of people as well. Yeah.
Hello. Okay, so sorry, I get very nervous. I guess what we're doing well is 2 years ago in Melbourne, we all met face to face for the first time, and those conversations and those meetings have continued online. So nationally, greyhound advocacy groups and welfare groups, rescues, have come together and spoken, shared information. We now can know what's happening in any one state within a matter of sort of 24 hours, and we can be sharing that, which is something that I don't think that they had anticipated. And it also helps us with resourcing and ideas to use in other states, as I've said. For WA personally, we have a fantastic podcast. If you would love to listen to that, we'd love you to. I think most of these people have actually, or they're either about to come on or have been guests. It's called, what's it called? Talking Couch Potatoes. Sorry, brain fart. I'm actually on it. But it shares a lot of information, and just even if you listen to one episode and take something from that, it's, you know, you can share that information. That's the biggest thing we need to get better at, is putting the information out there to public that don't love animals. And there's different ways of doing that, from an economic perspective, obviously from social media where we can, things like that. But thinking outside the box, I think, is going to be really important over the coming years. Thanks.
And hand that to you.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm the numpty that needs notes. Unlike these people. From a rescue point of view, what we are quite good at is enabling the industry by absorbing its collateral damage, unfortunately. At Friends of the Hound, our mission is to rescue, but our vision is not to have to. Greyhound racing is government-subsidised gambling whose long-term sustainability depends on public funding and public acceptance. That acceptance is changing globally. The future for greyhounds is shaped by what our community is prepared to accept, and political goodwill from effective lobbying. Greyhounds need us, not just to love them once they're abandoned by the gambling industry, but to demand a system where they do not endure mass homelessness in the first place. Real change will come when the wider community decides that loving greyhounds also means demanding better for them. Every person in this room has influence, and now is a great time to use it. We cannot be the strategy. We can all choose what to accept. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And let's give a big hand to all our panel members. This has been fantastic. Yay. And now I'll just quickly open it up if anybody has some questions for any of our panel members, and I'll bring this over to you. Oh.
Run. Okay. I've just, there's been an idea brewing in my mind for some time now, not just greyhounds, but because dogs, like any other animal, are often exploited, whether it's puppy farming, greyhounds, dogs used in animal experimentation, and yet the dog conversation is probably the easiest of all, because we often run into somebody in a cafe or up the road with the dog. You start the conversation about the dog's name, loving the dog. What would happen if we had leaflets on with us, with QRs, and going, did you know this about dogs? Or I see you're an animal lover. You hand over the leaflet in conversation. The QR goes whether it's to the greyhound industry, puppy farming, dogs in research, and people can then QR in, because I think we are a nation of dog lovers. It's just a thought.
We have used that there for the greyhounds, and I think it's a fantastic way to get people in cafes.
Bob, can you go up to the microphone?
Yeah.
No, just that we have used that in the past, and it is a useful strategy because, as you say exactly, we're down at the dog beach or in a cafe, and you've extended it this because you're including any dog, and then you can go on through the QR and to the link and talk about all the exploited animals.
You know, I do think we as a species have a special relationship with dogs. It goes back, I mean, in fact, I was watching a documentary about this recently. And so I think as animal rights activists, the fact that that relationship exists makes this issue in a way more confronting. I mean, it's more difficult for people to rationalize keeping a dog in a cage for essentially their entire life, or using it as a commodity to gamble on, than, quite frankly, some of the other animal issues. And I mean, that's just the reality, I think. And also, one other observation I'll just give is, I think greyhounds are among the only animals, maybe the only animals, that leave an exploitive industry like that and people interact with. Yeah. We don't meet the victims of vivisection labs most of the time, sometimes, but very rarely, not in a common way. So I think that does make this issue. It is one of the reasons why I think this issue is so important in the future of the movement.
Okay, yes, we have time for one last quick question before we break for lunch.
Thank you. Could you tell us something about the demographics of the people that actually go and invest in the racing itself, either do the racing, support it, and how that might inform our conversations to speak to people about this?
Why not? Yeah.
For betting, for gambling on, it's males between the ages of 25 and 35 are generally those that are gambling on them. But as far as participants, it is definitely a generational thing. So you've got maybe grandfather, grandmother, and their kids are handling the dogs at the track. They're, their grandchildren. And then in between, you've got mum and dad that might be also doing that, raising them, breeding them, training them that way. So sadly, it's a lower socioeconomic group of people that are involved in greyhound racing, which I think also makes it that much more vile that they're the group of people that the government is actually, using for their gain. So that's what Free the Hounds often say, is this is not just about animals, it's also about humans. We talk to vets, we talk to former participants, and there is real mental health problems within the industry due to what these people witness. On Talking Couch Potatoes is the name of our podcast. We actually have a former participant on that in our next episode. And it was harrowing listening to him and what he had witnessed from as a 14-year-old going through to and now he's estranged from his parents. So, and he's in his 50s. So, but definitely the older people generally train and use the dogs. And then, the demographic for gambling is males 25 to 35.
Sorry, that's
All right. Well, let's give a final hand to our panel members, and thank you. Thank you all very much.
Yep.